Hi, everybody, and welcome to another Dodge webinar. Today, I have the great pleasure of introducing you to my friends from Contruent, Carl Van Teen, Andy Verone, and Sophia Malgoza. And we're going to talk about a project that they asked us to do, which we have a free report about, and you'll see this QR code consistently throughout. Anytime you're ready, just snap that, and you'll get a free copy of this report. But it's about assessing the maturity of the major owners in the U.S. in terms of their management of project controls and all the functions related to project controls. We did this on a big survey. These guys had developed this maturity model, which I'll have Carl talk about a little bit later, really to help owners on a one-on-one basis, right? Let's assess your weaknesses, your strengths, right? So they asked us to go out and do it across a broad base. So now any owner who is assessing themselves can also see in a benchmark way, well, how do I compare to everybody else? Which is what we all want to know anyway, right? So we surveyed a whole lot of large owners, half public and half private, right? So we got both those sides. And then 40% of them were in that 100 million to 500 million capital program annually. The rest were over 500 million. So we had some billion plus folks in there. And it was all these very complex projects, the mission critical ones, utilities, some healthcare, manufacturing, mining, all the stuff that's really hard to do and really requires a lot of attention to project controls to keep these massive projects on budget, on schedule, with a good safety performance and all the other kinds of things that need to be achieved. We took advantage of Contruent's existing project controls maturity matrix. So you can see it deals with these 10 very critical activities from estimating, procurement on down, you can see. And we also dug into how integrated are your project controls. And for those owners that subset that did have in-house engineering, we also asked, all right, how are you managing that engineering? And I'm not going to talk about that one today, but it's in the report if you are one of those folks. The idea was for each one of these things, with every one of these owners in the survey, we said, rate your expertise, and we gave them definitions for what that means, and you'll see that in a minute. To what degree are you actually taking a process and standardizing it and really rolling it out enterprise-wide rather than, you do it 9 different ways? What kind of tools are you using to do it? Are you doing very function-specific digital tools and processes? Can you get real-time data to support your decision-making? And then we looked at some of the cross-functional aspects between some of these activities. Now, what that gave us was this wealth of information, because we could now develop a score for every single one of these responding organizations. We calculated a digital maturity score for them. So now we can talk about the whole owner industry in the US, the whole large owner industry, right? And how they behave, what maturity means. We asked them a lot about their performance so that we could correlate maturity to performance. We'll share that with you in a couple minutes. But, Carl is really the guy who came up with this whole thing. So, Carl, why don't you let people know how you did that, why you did that?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Steve. Maturity models are not a new thing. There's maturity models on project management, on project controls. So they're not a new thing to the market. But what we found was that often the maturity models are a bit higher level. They talk about controls at a high level, and they can tell you whether you're mature or not, but they can't necessarily tell you what to do to fix it. So our model, we built it out with a couple ideas in mind. One was to start to break it into the different disciplines within controls and take it down a level so that we could evaluate whether a company is mature in estimating, but not as mature in procurement, or they're really mature in cost, but they're not as mature in schedule. So giving the ability to break it down the next level, apply a people process tool filtered to things. Of course, we have a software tool that helps address some of these problems, but in order to really improve maturity and gain adoption of the tool, you have to work on the processes. You have to make sure your people are enabled to use those tools correctly. So we added that layer. And then the most important thing that we did while building this model was we tried to give lots of suggestions and quantifiable ways of moving from one level of the maturity to the next level. So it's okay to say, great, we're not mature in procurement, but now what do I do about it? How do I attack the problem? Where do I start? And that's what our model focuses on for each of those 10 disciplines. And that's why we built it.
That's so good, because there's too much in this industry of admiring the problem. Oh, this isn't as good as it could be. All right, what's for lunch? So not only have you been able to diagnose, but you've actually then been able to say, all right, here's a path of treatment for you, essentially, to make a medical analogy here. So it's more than just saying, yeah, we're not any good at this. Great, we all kind of knew that. Hey, but here's a path, right? And that's so important.
Yeah, Steve, I think for me, when Carl and I sit down with our customers or even our prospects, we like to start off in talking about brand reputation. Like, how important is your company brand? Is that, project that is running behind schedule or over budget or both, how does that impact your brand? How does that impact your next work, your next assignment, your next proposal? So we always like to start there from a foundational standpoint. It's like, how important is brand reputation? And obviously it's 100% important.
Yeah, it's interesting because you have internal and external, right? Because you report to somebody and they're watching your performance. Plus, these projects are huge. A lot of these things, everybody, the whole community is watching, right? And if it's taken a year longer than it should have, you're going to hear about it, man. And it's hard to shake that reputation from that point. So the findings were quite interesting. And this next chart here comes from the report. But you can see for each of these 10 things, on a 1 to 100, on a 0 to 100 scale, and they're all over the map, right? From things like estimating and procurement down in the 20s, but you have things like cost management or reporting in the 70s. But note that nobody is above 77, right? There's a lot of room for everybody. And in most cases, it's really in that mid-range, in that 40s, 50s kinds of range. There's a lot of work to be done against the ideal. So taking procurement as an example, if you do download the report, you'll see each one of these 10 has its own page, right? And you'll see there is the score. But here's how we got to that score. It'll explain how we got to that score in each case. For instance, here are the definitions we gave them, right? Pick one of these buckets. You're either high, moderate, or low around your general expertise, around the degree to which you are actually investing in integrating these functions, and then the degree to which you're doing something with a digital tool, because it never fails to amaze us how many people are still working with paper processes or maybe just working with rudimentary spreadsheets, where they've taken some digital tool from some other industry and tried to torture it enough to work in this crazy industry, And while there are so many bespoke tools that were developed just for this industry, they're not getting as much adoption as they could to help. And then we also break down in a very specific way for each one of these particular activities. For instance, around this one, you're seeing things like these contract libraries, things which are just very much focused on that particular activity. And in each case, we've got things which are very specific to each one of those activities. And then you're being rated to how widely those are being used, because this is based on all those responses to say, okay, we can now see what is being widely used, frequently, infrequently, or almost never used. And then there's that big thing of real-time data. This is a great example of where only 12 to 14 people say they have real-time data. They're driving in the rearview mirror, man. And unfortunately, that's still the case with so many of the things that we see. This probably lines up pretty well with the folks that you've been talking to on a one-on-one basis, right, Carl?
Yeah, it does for sure. Probably the biggest thing that we're finding as we're taking this out to customers that they appreciate is it's not just about the digital part of digital maturity. It's about the process and the people, making sure that your people are enabled and they understand why the tool was purchased and how they need to apply the tool, how it affects the people next to them, whether it's procurement and how they affect the scheduler, or the scheduler affects the cost person. So that connection and that integration, as you have it on the previous slide, is just such an important part of this process. So yeah, it's landing well for those reasons, as well as getting the real-time data and actually the tool doing its job.
Yeah. Yes, Steve, when Carl and I work with folks from every corner of the planet, I mean, there is an amazing amount of data. There's no question. But what is truly lacking is insights. And that's what Carl and I try to surface every call, every time we walk someone through the project controls maturity models. Incredible amount of data. How are you turning that data into insights? And you know, through the maturity, as you go up the maturity curve, as your report says, those that are getting those insights in a timely manner, in a matter of hours, right? And those are the ones that are having the insights to make course corrections on their big programs and on their projects. Super important.
So, as is the case in so many of the other types of processes and technologies throughout the industry, a whole lot of people are using a whole lot of stuff, right? But it doesn't really roll up to what we can call maturity. You take a look here at the highest, the things that scored the highest, right? So what's common about that? Well, all of these, you'll notice they rely heavily on data from across the organization. You have to be a team player, right? It forces you out of your comfortable little silo, right? With your happy single tool, you have to, in order to do these things, you've got to work with other people on this thing. And so these are the things, these are the kinds of activities, it clearly makes them very strong candidates for investing in the kinds of integrations and the kinds of demanding of that real-time access that makes a lot of sense for that. And so they end up scoring fairly well. Although a really interesting finding around that real-time data is that even though for these two, you can be at a fairly high maturity level, it does not always translate to real-time data. Look at this, what we found on these two, 80% of people are dealing with monthly data. Monthly data, I mean, please. Oh, man. And then when you look at the lowest digital maturity activities, relatively few of the owners are reporting that they have decided, look, we've been doing this 16 different ways over the years. This is the best way. We're all going to agree to do it this way. Let's be consistent about it, right? They have these consistent enterprise-wide processes, but very few of these do around estimating, around procurement, around field management, right? So it really hurts their maturity because that was a key metric, right? To what degree have you really standardized on it and are enforcing it? I'm sure you guys are seeing that.
Yeah, and especially on those areas where there's maybe less maturity in the procurement areas. I think that sometimes it's easy to just go after the individual discipline and aim for maturity and digital maturity in that discipline and forget about the connections back to the overall control picture. How does procurement relate back to cost? So the companies that are doing it best are the ones that have stepped up a level and defined their digital strategy for the whole business. And how does each discipline need to coordinate with each other? They've defined their training strategy that way so that people get to talk to each other and understand each other's roles. The ones that aren't doing that, then they lag, as your report showed.
Yeah. So when you look at this real-time access issue, I mean, these are the findings of the differences across those 10. To how many people either always, the dark green bar, or at least sometimes the lighter green bar, can say, yeah, I'm getting real-time access. This spread is incredible, right? And it, of course, rolled up to higher digital maturity scores for some of those other, the higher ones. But I think when you look at these top two, I can understand, and I think any of us could understand, sort of from a natural selection viewpoint, why they ended up being the ones where people demand real-time access. Because if you don't have it, you are really in deep, deep trouble. So I just call it urgency, right? These two have the highest urgency associated with them, right? You get down to the next group, they're still pretty good, but hey, you know, if something comes up in the schedule, you can move things around, right? Some field management stuff, you don't really have to have that instant information, right, the way you do with the first two. And then you look at the rest of them and you go, okay, well, these are generally, they're kind of longer cycle processes anyway, right? And so kind of by natural selection, the industry has focused on those two top ones, and then the next two after that as being the ones that they're demanding and finding a way to get some real-time access to. Although clearly there will be benefit across the board to having real-time access to all these things.
Yeah, the real-time access is such an important part of it, but we're also finding that making sure it's real-time access to the right information for the right audience is such a key part that customers generally need help with. We did a project recently with a rail group with government sponsorship, where a lot of the reporting on changes in contractor activity was surfacing issues that needed to be addressed, and it was doing it quickly. But then it was also that those same metrics were making their way all the way up to board level and the top level, leaving out some of the decision making and judgment around contingency use and things like that. So what it was doing was it was creating unnecessary fire drills and fire alarms for issues. So in that process of getting the real-time data, we're trying to help customers, make sure that they're getting real-time data, but for this audience, this data, and for this audience, make sure you're paying attention that it's filtered a different way so you don't introduce noise into your system and start to cloud the picture.
Yeah, there's a real art to what we refer to as layered reporting, right? If some piece of information goes right to the top, it looks like the world has ended, right? Whereas the three people along the way could moderate it, mitigate it, and say, this isn't that big a deal. We've dealt with this before. This is how we're going to deal with it, as opposed to just going, the world's on fire, CEO.
Once the CEO
That's the one thing.
Fire, it can get interesting quick.
It's the interesting thing, and I've had this data. You guys, helped you guys with the report. The one thing that still surprises me, and we don't have to go back or double click on it, is the change management piece, right? So change that's happening on a project, the availability to that real-time data was still way lower than I ever thought. I thought if you're keeping track of cost, that change in costs go together. But the findings, I every time I see that slide, I just can't wait to get the data and see see what the results are, see what the underlying reason for that is.
Yeah. The other thing which we saw so clearly here, it is echoed in every other study that we do. We did this one, optimizing construction tech for large owners, a year or so ago, and it's a lot of the same things, right? Everybody's got all these point solutions, right? Only 31% of people were using any kind of platform, right? 88% of the point solutions also, they may have 5, 6, 7, 8 different estimating tools. Well, Bobby and Sally like this one, yeah, and George and Lois like that one, and we're just gonna and they're paying the license fees and they're worrying about the updates. And of course, none of these point solutions were ever built to play nice with anybody else. They're just little unique worlds in and of themselves. And so the industry has almost suffered too much from the success of that first wave of automation, which was about just getting us off of paper. Right. And the challenges are that, of course, now really important data is all locked up. And these things were never meant to be interoperable. So there's all kinds of workarounds and integration tie-ins that have to happen. And that functionality is never really perfect. And so you get all kinds of data migration problems. And the top priority right now is, all right, how do we increase this ability to integrate between systems? Because almost all the owners that we've ever surveyed, they've all optimized individual systems first. And fine, okay, go fix that one, go fix that one, go fix that one. In those days, that was what was thought of as being digitizing your processes. But now the real problem is orchestrating, right? I mean, I played in a lot of bands coming up, and I know if we had a great guitar player and a great bass player and a great keyboard player, that did not mean that we were going to have a good band. It's like they're all soloing at once, right? Doesn't orchestrate. And we did another one here about connected construction, right? Which is the theme here, right? And there's such strong internal silos. People get really dug in on this stuff, and they're a little bit better at exchanging information between internal departments. Although 62% is not great, only 41% said that they were really any doggone good at sharing with all the external team partners and really feeding the ecosystem, right? And so again, owners traditionally now have gotten really good at optimizing very specific functions within departments, but they're not very good at really feeding the whole ecosystem. And adoption alone just no longer is enough because it, in many ways, it deepens fragmentation, it hardens fragmentation in some cases. And so the weak point's often the connection layer between organizations and workflows. And we're seeing this not just with owners. I mean, all the research we do, the industry as a whole, architects, engineers, contractors, everybody, they have all become really good at just this kind of getting rid of paper. Yeah, great. But now we have these dug in little isolated point solutions. And, you know, it's just generally less mature right now. And the value comes, and people are learning this more and more, comes from being able to do that kind of organizational orchestration and shared data environments, right? We call it connecting decisions.
Yeah, the customers that we're seeing, and I'll use infrastructure examples again in the UK, is probably some of the best projects we've seen doing this. It's when they're focused on improving their own digital maturity, which is of course important, and across the various disciplines within controls. But they don't control, as an owner, they don't control all the detailed data that's out in the supply chain in 50, 100, sometimes hundreds of different businesses in that ecosystem. And so they're focused on how to create an environment where that data can come in more seamlessly so you can get that real-time connection of the data, or at least closer to real time. Yeah. It's a big trick, figuring out how to deal with the coding structures in this company. This supplier does it one way and the other one does another. But the businesses that are really making the strides in digital maturity are focused on solving that problem. And it's a lot of fun, but some are making good progress.
Yeah. So this idea of integration, you know, we dug into it, and we had people put themselves in a bucket, right? Describe your current state, and only 36%, which is better than it could have been, right? But still, only about a third can really say, yeah, we've got fully integrated tools that are really feeding us the kind of real-time access to data through a single system access that we really need in order to be optimally functional, right? 92% are doing something, right? You still have 8% are wandering hopelessly in the unintegrated wilderness. But we asked those 92%, we said, okay, what are you connecting? Because we wanted to see, all right, of all the connections you could make between all the functions you have, where does it seem to be that people are focusing? And we don't get 100% too much in our business, but these came through some very strongly, right? These ones on the left, you're seeing a whole lot of connection here between change and cost and schedule and reporting analytics, right? But then it begins to tail back off, and these were the best. They got real thin after that, right? So there's a few things that pretty much everybody is connecting. And again, this might be very good in terms of a roadmap for folks to look at it and say, I see most of my peers are at least connecting these things. We have those and those. Oh, we don't have those two. We should at least do that, right? So this is where the kind of benchmarking is super valuable, right? You can see what other people are doing, which equates and correlates to better performance for them.
That's it. And on that prior one, it's an interesting thing that to the right, the engineering and procurement are areas that maybe have had less attention. They're earlier in the life cycle. So those are the ones you want to fix first, because they can have, you might not feel the effect for a couple of years, but those are the ones that if you get right can have the biggest impact. So
yeah. And the way their impact is noticed is that you have fewer problems. Yeah. Which is the whole thing. It's really about mitigation. It's the game of mitigation. Yeah. And so we calling this thing sort of the speed of insight, right? That the value of that real-time information. We wanted to make sure that people understood why it's important. Like, why should I care, right? And when we looked at the very highest maturity players, right, what had they done? Well, they'd connected their digitized functions. They had standardized on those processes enterprise-wide, and they put some accountability in place, frankly. It's not voluntary anymore, right? And they've integrated at least their cost, schedule, and risk, and their, to your point, their change workflows, right? And so those are characteristics that are pretty consistent across all those top performers. So as a result, they can see stuff much more quickly. They can see these deviations and they can act in near real time, identify these issues, coordinate their responses faster, right? So these connected project controls really allow owners to see the stuff sooner than they were before, understand those impacts, be prepared for them, and move quickly, right? So it keeps those just small issues which could have been dealt with. And if they aren't dealt with, man, they fester and they turn into really, really big problems and major overruns.
Yeah, it's such an important thing. The change management is maybe the easiest example, dealing with changes on, multi-billion-dollar programs and mega programs, things like that. There's going to be hundreds, sometimes thousands a week. And it's not, the bragging right isn't that, gee, you can manage that much volume and you can produce that data so quickly. It's that you're able to give, customers something to act on, make decisions about, and fix the small problems before the trends start taking you into big problems. And you can change the course of the project that way. If they fester, sometimes even for a week or 2 weeks, then you start to get that.
Yeah, that's where you see the toxicity of that monthly reporting.
Yeah.
Geez, if we'd have known this 27 days ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, I think the other thing that we're seeing when Carl and I are out working with customers is in my 41 years serving engineering construction, the ability to connect data, the technologies that are out there today are second to none, like I've never seen. So the owners now have the technologies to make that take all that data and bring it out and just create amazing insights. And that IT, that information, that infrastructure, it hadn't been around. And today, like, we're seeing owners do some incredible work with using the technology that's available to surface many of those insights.
Yeah, you don't have to go invent this stuff. Somebody has done all the hard work. You just now have to apply it in your world. And as always, we ask people in our surveys about their performance so that then we can correlate, oh, geez, is there any relationship between those who are more mature and better performance? Yeah. A little thing like, oh, I can generate data within hours rather than days when something, when a fire pops up. 80% of the top guys can do it. 13% of the rest could say they could do that. I mean, these things are staggering, right? And in some cases, they're not quite as dramatic, right? 1/4 of the projects or fewer experience material change orders, right? Less than 5% of the original contract value. I mean, okay, the whole industry is doing okay with that, but I'd rather be in that left-hand bucket, that 80% bucket, than that 71% bucket all day long. And then in terms of outcomes themselves, can you say that 75% or more of your projects are completed on or under budget? Look at the difference between those folks who are the most mature among all these owners and everybody else. It's just staggering. There's a powerful correlation here. And then schedule is the same, an 8x factor. It's lower, of course, because everybody knows schedules are the hardest thing to wrestle to the ground in every study that we do. Cost is something you can manage a little bit. You can, cut here and cut there. Unless you're Einstein, you can't go out and change time. And again, something that's relatively smaller in terms of its differential here, but still, I'd rather be in that 100% bucket, right, to say that I'm keeping within 5% of my cost forecast, right? Because again, your forecast is something that you are held responsible for, and you ought to be as good as you can be about it. And it gets tested every single time because you got to come up in advance of what your cost forecast is going to be, and then how does it play out? Well, I'd rather be in that 100% bucket all day long. And so when you think about how is it that these more mature owners are achieving the better performance, what it says in terms of their responses is that they're just more disciplined operationally. They are more integrated organizationally, and they're better at institutionalizing those processes, right? The less mature folks, they're digital, okay? They've gone through that big first wave of digital transformation, but it's a whole lot of little point solutions, right? Whereas what you're seeing in those really top level mature organizations, they're connecting things, right? They're all about orchestrating and connecting, and they're doing it operationally, and it's driving that better performance, right?
Yeah, we see that a lot. And, I'll use mining customer out of Asia Pacific that's making very good progress. They had the tools, they had the right processes. Institutionalizing those processes and getting folks on the teams to use the tools the way that they were set up, to use the processes the way they were designed, wasn't necessarily happening initially. And that happens time and again. If there are consultants on this call listening, I'm sure they see this on a regular basis. Once we get to the exec level and we start to discuss how this can impact the overall picture and the digital strategy and why institutionalizing these processes can help them and the results it can give them, then it starts to force that down into the business. And now they're seeing wonderful effects from it. And the teams have been enabled as well to understand what they get out of using those processes that have been redesigned for them, using the tools that have been provided to them. It's such an important part of it. That's the only way you achieve that digital maturity is if you focus on that as well and get the buy-in and that discipline.
And Steve, that's always an easy conversation for Carl and I to have when we're working with an owner that is looking at the program level. There may be 100 projects that are rolling up to the program. So that magnifies the issue. Like if
they're out there herding the cats, man.
Exactly. Exactly. So that we always love to start there. If we get the opportunity to use the project controls maturity model, when you get that owner that says my program is worth $5 billion, right? Yeah. And that program could be 100 projects that roll up to it. It really does matter, right? You've got to get it right. You got to have the connected systems. You have to have the insights, right? You've got to go collect that data.
Reminder to anybody watching, if you have questions for these folks, just type them into the Q&A over there, and we'll have some time at the end. These two fellows, as you can see, have a wealth of experience all over the world at helping people do a better job with project controls. And so this raises the question, of course, of, how are these more mature owners achieving greater cost predictability? Is it that they have a better crystal ball somewhere, right? They have some voodoo princess in the back room allowing them to predict the future better? No, man. They are in a position now, right, where they have information coming to them such that they can detect deviation earlier and respond faster. It's just that simple, right? Because what you look at, the folks who are in that most mature group, they're doing and we asked them about, how many of you are doing these specific things? Are you doing the plan actual remaining forecasting? Yes or no? Or to what degree? And are you doing that integrated performance baselines? Are you doing scenario modeling? Are you doing what if analyses? These are the things that prepare you, right, to then be able to react in real time. So the difference is really less about this kind of magical predictive ability, and it's more about getting that early, setting yourself up for success by having that early visibility, and then having all these other scenarios worked out such that, hey, you've war gamed this already. If this should happen, we know what to do, and you can do it quickly, and it keeps things from blowing up.
Yeah. You said it earlier on the call. I think most folks and most businesses are great at identifying the problem, but what about the fix? And the what if analysis and the scenario modeling and those capabilities, if you can identify the problem and also present leadership with potential fixes, give them something to make a decision about, then you're getting the results of your digital investment.
Yeah, Steve, I think the other thing that Carl and I, we have some very sophisticated owners that we work with every day. And when they have digitized the process, they have worked through the change management, that not the project change management, the organizational change management, and they have insights that now what they're looking at is true predictive analytics, right? Because they have 500,000 schedules. They have, plenty of projects that they have cost information on. Can they, and Carl and I call it, is kind of being optimized, which is going to have to leverage the AI capabilities that are out there and say, tell me for this size, type, and location of a project, what could a prediction be, right? So that's coming. I mean, I think, looking down the road 3 or 4 years, the owners that are in that position are well on their way to digital maturity, and they're thinking about how can AI help us get to a true predictive state.
Right. Yeah. All the studies that we've done on AI, it all hinges on the quality of the input.
Yeah.
If you have garbage in, it is the biggest and most flaming example of garbage out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, everybody would like to get better. There's nobody who's almost nobody who's happy about their current situation. So what's holding you back? And so we always ask this of folks, right? What's impeding you? What are your challenges? And the complexity of implementation. People are a little daunted by what's involved in actually making this sort of evolutionary change within their organization to get better and to get more mature, right? And then there is, after that, the classic, the 52% saying, yeah, there's going to be resistance. We see that in every survey we do, because this is a risk management business. That's what it is. At the end of the day, all this really is risk management. And so now you're asking me to change okay, I get that it's not great, but it gets the damn thing built, right? Process I've been relying on for a couple of decades to do something with some new technology or some new process or some new way workflows or something. I'm going to resist that, right? That's natural. But how to overcome that has to be an individual challenge. And it gets to the fact that this is, at the end of the day, a people business. And to get the hearts and minds aligned, right, is the key. And then some difficulty integrating with other systems, and that we see that a lot also, and that's reasonable. What's nice is that the things on the right that you see there didn't score very highly at all, right? So that's not the stuff to worry about. It's these three things on the left that are probably the ones that need the most amount of attention in order to move forward, right? Because when you think about what complexity is, there's that hard side of it, if you will, the kind of technology side. I've got to integrate a whole bunch of stuff. We've been using some of these point solutions for decades. I still have to keep them in play. How do I make them play with some new things I'm doing? And you may, in these large organizations that you're dealing with, have some corporate IT requirements that whatever we do has to comply with. So there's complexity there, but it's also extremely important to acknowledge the people side of this business. You are going to be organizationally disruptive when you do something at this level. You're going to have some process redesign. You're going to have to get everybody to agree on, all right, yes, I've been doing that this way. I agree to now do it the way we've all agreed with, and I am subject to the accountability strictures for it, right? And it's going to probably mean an operating model transformation, not just, hey, the tech guys are coming in, they're plugging something, and it'll all look the same. No, this is really changing how you go to business and who you are. And you're going to need data governance, right? Because you can't have garbage coming in. So you're going to have to make sure people are complying with how they're entering as well as accessing information with some accountability. And then you just got the classic change management thing that any organization always has when you want to try and change things. It's just behavior change. And there's some natural resistance to that because we are people at the end of the day, right? And then, to your point earlier with these programs, meanwhile, we got 100 projects underway right now. So I got to change the wheels on this bus while we're going 100 miles an hour down a mountain road. Okay, no problem. So there's a reason why that is number one, right? But it's all deal withable, right? These are things which a lot of people have done, right? And there's ways to work through that. It's not a reason not to do things. And the same as I showed in the other chart, and I think it's important to see what don't score very highly in terms of barriers, because we offer all these things. We said, tell us which your top ones are. These are all very low, right? They're not concerned about the data security, not concerned about not having enough money. The money's there. It's not like they don't know that there's a solution. It's not like they don't have senior management support to do it. And very few say, nah, we don't need any help. We're doing great. Thankfully, almost everybody realizes that it could be better, right? So it's important to see that these aren't the things, right? Those top three back there were really the keys in terms of wrestling this thing to the ground.
Yeah, they're solvable problems. They're not solved by technology alone, just by buying the software and saying, here you go, teams, good luck, hope it goes well. But they are solvable problems. One of the most successful and complex initiatives that I've recently worked on was with a global owner who had to deal with pulling data together from different regions around the world, different entities that had different instances of their ERP system. And so they had to integrate that information. They had to overcome multi-currency complexity and issues like that. So these are big problems to solve. Multiple sites, multiple countries, pull it together in order to create that environment where you get the real-time data access at the different levels for the execs and for the headquarters and at the project level. The way they attacked it was brilliant. They thought about the technical complexity. They laid out the steps around process and data structures and things like that. Basically built a project plan that took us through those steps. And then we did a roadshow to overcome that organizational complexity as well, because the people on the ground that are going to be receiving these systems and working in them have to understand how things are going to connect, why it's important, how it helps them, how it helps the mothership, so to speak. It was a great success story, but they absolutely had to overcome some of that implementation complexity and the organizational change piece. But they're solvable. They're solvable problems if you break them into piece parts like any good project.
And so, as you step back and look, what do we learn here when we look at these most mature functions? The thing which is common here is that there is a good, solid degree of investment in these standardized institutional, this is how we do it. This becomes, it's not just some rule. No, this is who we are now. We all do this together. We all share this activity together. This is how we've all agreed is the best way to do it. And we're behind it, right? You get the people behind it, that what's in it for me at the field level is just as important as what's in it for me at the mothership level. Right? The ability for owners to have that real-time access, because that is so critical to any kind of real decision making. And then owners' use of a platform solution, because having to tie the effort involved in having to tie together all kinds of multiple systems is just so much less worth it all the time when there are existing platforms out there that you can easily migrate to, right? That just tie everything together for you. And as we've shown in the previous slides, that maturity correlates directly to better performance. It's unquestionable, right? That you can say, truthfully, it drives that better performance. It's not just happily correlated somewhere in the background. No, it's a real driving reason for it. And so how does that maturity drive better performance, right? When you look at the less mature folks, as we said before, they're all digital. That's not the issue anymore. But it's all these little silos of excellence. The guys at the top of the scale, this is who they are now. They've embedded these digital functions. They aren't something in a binder somewhere or something somebody talks about but you can ignore. No, this is the new, who we are and how we actually operate, guys. We're a digital organization. And they're integrated organizationally, right? So it's so much easier, especially across those functions that require lots of different parts of your internal organization to work in harmony together. And they're just more disciplined about institutionalizing these ways of how we do things with some teeth, right? With some accountability. It's not voluntary anymore. And I think when you look at that, those things are all very achievable, right?
Yeah, and creating visibility. The high maturity owners are also creating visibility between those silos so that folks in this department can see what's happening over here. Can't necessarily change it or influence the data, but they can see the results. They can learn from how their peers are doing things. So the most successful businesses we're seeing are using platforms, digital platforms like ours that create that visibility across the different functions and controls.
Yeah, and Steve, just to summarize that, when Carl and I are working with those owners, if done right, it becomes part of the company's culture. I mean, that's what it is, man. It just becomes
who we are.
Exactly. Who we are and how we do it.
Yeah. And as one of my owner friends likes to say, the whole goal is no surprises. No surprises. If it's bad news, I just want to know about it in time to deal with it. I just can't deal with surprise.
Carl's heard me say this too many times. Bad news early is good news.
That's true. Yeah. And to your point about this competitive advantage aspect, old days, even as much as 10 years ago or so, I mean, it wasn't this challenging of an environment to build things in. Schedules were generally a little bit longer, capital was cheaper, supply chains were way more stable than they are, and projects were frankly kind of less complex, both digitally and operationally. Today, time is really very much of a financial variable now. You've got debt carrying costs. If you are delaying revenue, right, that has really nasty impacts on the mothership, right? If you have, in any kind of institution, you've got enrollment cycles, you've got manufacturing startup times, you got the whole product development team waiting for this thing to get ready. When is it going to be ready, man? You're keeping us out of the market. And then something like data centers, where you got this unstoppable tsunami of market demand, right? And you may even have contractual milestones, right? You can't be lax and casual anymore about that time. It really hurts you from that competitive advantage, right? So digital maturity improves the predictability and the responsiveness and what we like to call decision velocity.
Yeah, and that's what it all comes down to is helping them speed up the decision process so that people can do something with that data. Fast data is great, but you got to give them something to act on so that they can get better business outcomes for their business. That's what this maturity model and our efforts have been all about.
Yeah. So the way I see this at the end of the day, my takeaways from this is that most of the owners out there, they're already in the digital pool. That's not the problem anymore, right? The problem is that they have, it's that first wave of automation has almost been too successful. You now have, where you used to have embedded paper processes, now you have embedded silos of information around point solutions. So it's time to evolve beyond that in order to be able to align processes, because processes tend to be very much aligned with the technology that's supporting them, right? So let's all agree on what the best process is. Then we'll all agree that this technology supports that process, and then people can make decisions in a way that supports the whole organization. And the organizations that are seeing the best outcomes, they're not doing anything magical. There's no voodoo princess in the back room, right? As we have seen all through this report, all it is basic blocking and tackling, just done at an enterprise scale, and they're disciplined about it, right? Such as those folks that you talked about. They developed essentially a project plan to get better at being project planners, right? And they're tying the things together that have some impact, that have meaning for them, so they can have a unified operating model, right? And then the digital maturity is important for everybody to always understand. It's a journey. It's not binary. It's not, hey, we reached the top of the mountain, great, let's crack open a beer and enjoy the view. No. This is going to be a continual process, because the environment's going to get more complex. You can guarantee on that. Projects will get more complex. There will be greater schedule pressure, right? There'll be greater supply chain disruptions. This is just the world we live in. It's not going to get easier to do projects, right? So this is just going to be this incremental progression, right? The Japanese principle of Kaizen, small improvements continually all the time. Just getting better visibility, Carl, to your point, right? And integration, Andy, to your point, and this decision-making is just getting better over time, never giving up on it, right? Making it, this is our mission. We want to get better. It's like athletes, right? You always want to jump higher, run faster, right? There are all these athletes that are doing this stuff, right? And the great thing, it's all very achievable. And we're looking at what this top group here is doing. They're killing it, It's all very doable.
Yeah. Just like athletes, all based on consistency and one change at a time. Then you win the Super Bowl. You don't win it in one game.
Yeah, Steve, this is a big day for us. I have my controls maturity little brochure that I carry around, and I saw you 2 years ago at E&R Future Tech, and I sat down at your table and I flipped you through, just the fundamentals of it. And you looked at me and said, let's do something together with that. And today's that day, right? Today's that day that we partnered, and Carl and I absolutely thank you and the team for just helping us, man, helping us get the good news out about rock solid project controls maturity and the impact that it has on your program and your projects around the world for the owners. So thank you so much, Brett. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I think what we've done is we've shown that it's worth doing.
Yep.
And why? Why should I care? Well, this is why you should care. Sophia, have any questions come in from our attendees?
Hi, everyone. Yes, we have a few questions here. The first one is, if I want to improve my project controls digital maturity this year, but can only focus on one thing, where should I start?
I'll turn that over to you guys.
That's a big question. Just because there's so many project controls, I guess I'd start with cost first. I'd start in the cost arena, and I'd try to focus on getting the cost and schedule integration piece to work, just because that's fundamental to the rest of controls. Everything else that will come after that, whether it's tracking the field management or engineering progress or some of the other disciplines, those are all important. But if you can get the cost and the schedule piece talking to each other first and get people to understand the importance of it, that's the right starting place. And then, of course, the dashboards and the reports that come from that data, so that you can get the quick analytics and reports around those two areas of cost and schedule integration. I'd start there. Andy, would you add to that or change it?
I think that's the place to start, right? I think that then becomes kind of the system of record for project controls, and then you can build off from that data set.
And I'll just offer why we do reports like this is you could also take a look at what the more mature folks are doing in this report and say, where do I benchmark myself against that? You can also contact the folks here at Contruent. They'll run through the maturity model with you, so you can do a scoring for your own company and then compare yourself. And that'll give you some things right away to see where you're lagging your peers. Right, because that could be an important place to say, I at least have to reach parity with the folks out there who look a lot like me, and see what I can do and begin to enjoy that. And that's also then becomes a little bit of a proof of concept for making change. Change management's never easy. So if you have some things where it's going to be pretty obvious that you'll have some success with it, right? Some of that low-hanging fruit, do that. All right, and then that's going to build some momentum internally, because people go, oh, hey, yeah, this is better. That's it. What else you got? All right, and then you can begin tackling some of the things which everybody's struggling more with, but where in your own organization you're going to find some value.
Yeah, the QR codes throughout the presentation have been taking you to the report from Dodge Data. We don't have the QR code out here for the actual maturity model. So if you want to get a look at the actual maturity model and where that can take you, and how we can help you assess what areas you're more mature than others, and what some corrective steps are to actually fix areas where you're less mature, just let us know. We'd be glad to share that as well. But it's not in these QR codes.
You can certainly find Contruent online and get in touch with these guys.
We have one more question. It's sort of similar to the first one, but many organizations know they need to improve their digital maturity, but worry about the effort involved. For example, the implementation complexity. What advice would you give owners who are just starting their digital transformation journey?
I'll take a first crack at that, Carl. I think the success that Carl and I have had over the last 3 years is when we sit down with those owners that want to commit, we always start at a business unit level, right? Or maybe even at a program level inside a business unit. So we always like to prove that this is going to be an advantage and achievable for you. And Carl gave a great example, earlier. But we don't try to go in and say we're going to try to change the whole organization. Some of these organizations, there's a utility company in southeastern United States that I spend a lot of time with. I mean, it's a massive organization with many opcos and business units. We go in, we find the one that maybe has a huge budget, so maybe they have a $5 billion budget in one of their opcos, and we go work on that. And then that helps build the process, build the training, right? Help with the change management of it, and then we go out from there. And that is our fundamental playbook. Very seldom do we go in at a corporate level and say, we are going to change your project controls capabilities. Let's go prove it, right? We always say projects lead the programs, programs lead the business units roll up to corporations. So we take a very, very structured approach to that. And like, we want to prove that this maturity is going to impact your business, protect your brand, show value to your shareholders. And we do, that's our approach. And I think that's a great question, because I think all too often, I happened to be a CIO for a publicly traded company many years ago, doing those big corporate system change outs. It's just hard, and it takes a lot of time and money.
Yeah, and if you're not careful, you can exhaust your business and your people trying to tackle the whole problem at once. So just like Andy says, you gotta break it into some pieces, bite-sized pieces, and then as you achieve certain milestones, you celebrate that success, you demonstrate that success, and you gather some momentum around that. But you got to break it into a project.
Yeah, the bite-sized pieces is so key. Being in the position I am, doing all this tech research, I get a call a week from somebody who's scraped up some venture capital money, and they've built this thing, and oh man, it's going to transform the whole industry. And I go, the whole industry does not need to be transformed. It needs to be improved a little bit in 10,000 ways. Okay. Which of those do you have? Oh no, man, you don't understand. No. This is going to change everything. I said, stop saying that. Nobody wants to change everything, right? Just how does what this whiz bang thing you've come up with help a superintendent at 9:30 on a Wednesday morning when a laborer just broke his arm, the electrical guy hasn't shown up, and the steel's going to be 2 weeks late? I'm listening. Oh no, man, they're not going to be superintendents. There's going to be flying robots.
Well, nobody asked this question, or at least we haven't heard it yet. But since we're talking about digital, AI is kind of the thing that is now going to fix everything and change the whole industry. But I've been finding that it's a lot of the same thing we're talking about. What are the individual 10,000 problems that need to be solved? Take AI and solve a few of them at a time, rather than just saying, gee, AI will fix everything. So that's been our approach to AI, and what we're trying to build into our our offerings, whether it's the process piece or the software pieces.
That aligns very closely with what I tell every tech company I can talk to about AI. Shut up about it and just start putting it into your tool. Suddenly your tool's going to work a whole lot better. Your renewals will go up. You'll start taking business away from your competitors because everybody will see that you actually do it better, and just put it into the tool where it makes sense and stop talking about it and overhyping it. It's tiresome, the degree to which it's getting overhyped at this point. It's great, but just put it in your tool where it makes sense, and make sure, and you've already gone to a lot of effort, right, to organize and structure data inside your tool. That's the holy grail. Now just put that to use in a better way in terms of how to leverage that data. That's the magic of AI. All right, if there's no other questions, then I think I want to thank you guys, Carl, Andy. You guys have done incredible work here to create a framework in which people can make really strong, hard decisions about how to get better at something that is critically important, right? We're really helping the industry. And I want to congratulate you for doing that. And I'm glad we were able to help support that. Again, this is the download. It's free. Share it with your friends. Swap them and trade them. That's why we do these things. And stay tuned, and we'll see you next time Dodge has another webinar. Bye-bye, everybody.
Appreciate your partnership, Steve. Thank you, buddy.